Good morning and happy Mother's Day weekend. And we're just a couple of days from Mother's Day Sunday. It tends to be a pretty big day of church going and restaurant going. And of course, that gives me a good indication of where not to go. I may go to church because it's full, but I'm not going to go to a restaurant that's overcrowded on a busy Sunday. But happy Mother's Day to you moms, and hope you're thankful for your mom if you've got a mom still living. And if you're going to our church, it may still have time to take a picture of you and your mom, or moms, you and your kids, and send them to the church office here. We have a slideshow going to be going on Sunday morning of moms and kids, and just going to be scrolling through before services and after. But you can send that, call the office today. It'd be the best thing to know for sure where to send it. I can't tell you. But anyway, if you know Matt Peterson's number, he's the one doing it, but I don't know that off the top of my head. You just push Matt Peterson on my phone. But anyway, I hope you had a good week and looking forward to a good weekend. I was able to be at the Golden State Baptist College graduation Wednesday night. Got to see a lot of our folks. We've got people, of course, who've moved out of California, took the equity and packed up and left the liberals, and so I got to see quite a few of our folks that have family or friends graduating. And I don't know, there had to be at least 50 of our folks there at North Valley Baptist, and some from our church now, but most of them from out of town. And of course, we got to see a bunch of our kids. Brother Valdez, our Spanish pastor, he and I took the boys whose parents were there. We took them to dinner and just talked about their future, and they're all wanting to serve God. And we were blessed. And the devil hates it when a church is putting out young people who want to serve God. The devil hates anybody, period. And he doesn't want people to get saved. When they get saved, then he hates and wants to keep them from being useful. And then if people do get saved and get useful, the devil hates the people that they're going to influence. And so he'll work at messing things up for them. And it's a battle. You think about the scripture. Paul said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Paul said we fight the good fight. He talked in Timothy about we should live as good soldiers. And we're not in a relaxed Christian life. If your Christian life is relaxed, either you're not saved or you're saved and not doing anything, because it's a battle. And the devil would love to see you and me be ineffective and not influencing others. And for me, you know what? We're on this old dirty world. Let's make a difference, and let's help people, and let's be an encouragement to people. So anyway, I want to just say a quick word or two. Lately, with our 40th anniversary, I've mentioned a few things. Just thinking about things that we did on a couple of maybe a week or so ago. I talked about how we came here and started the church. We knocked on doors for 6 weeks, met in the Wildomar school. Our first church sign, there's a teenage girl, high school senior, Barbara Driscoll. And Barbara was a good girl, public school, but had grown up in church. And she wanted to make our sign for us. And I said, oh, it'd be great. Maybe I asked her. I can't remember. It's been 40 years ago. But she just took a piece of construction paper, just 2 foot by 3 foot, and wrote Faith Baptist Church and whatever time we met. And we stuck it out in front of the Wildomar school. I knocked on doors for 6 weeks. But other than that, that sign was our advertising. And I tried to get an ad in the newspaper, but I don't think that worked. I got an ad in the paper after our first Sunday, reporting what had happened, so as news, not advertising. And we've got a copy of that on one of the Sunday school foyer walls. It's got 41 picture from each year, key moment, and something in each year. And there's been some wonderful people over the years. But we met that first week in the school. They gave us 6 weeks. And so for 6 weeks, we met there Sunday morning. Sunday nights, we met in someone's home. And then Wednesday night, someone else's home. And that was where we met. And just share a quick story. It's where we met Bill and Sherry Pattison. There was a vacant house And we had met a lady knocking on doors. She came to church, Lucille Long, and her daughter had a house that was empty. She said, I bet my girls would let us use their living room, just put chairs in there for Sunday night church. And I thought, oh man, that'd be great. And we had maybe a dozen people or so, and it's just those first weeks of the church. But we had 50 or 60 people the first morning, and I don't know if it ever got below 45 or 50. But so we had Sunday nights to make a decision. So anyway, they had the daughter said we could use her house, so we used it for 5 or 6 weeks. I think the whole time we were in the school, we used her house. Well, anyway, Mrs. Long was there, and we'd brought a few chairs. We didn't have anything. We were brand new. We had nothing. We lived in a little furnished apartment with roaches, and it was a mess. You couldn't put two of us in the kitchen at the same time. And so she said, I know the neighbors. They're real nice. They'll loan us some chairs. So we went over and got a couple chairs and brought them. Then the next week we got a few more chairs because we were getting more people. I don't know, third week or so, fourth week, they're carrying the chairs over. And that's Bill and Sherry Pattison. And they said, well, we had to come to church. We didn't have any chairs left in our house, which was an exaggeration. They had plenty of chairs, but they're great people. And they had a boy, Mark, who was about 8th grade, 9th grade, somewhere in there. They had a daughter, Mark's one of our faithful workers in our church today, 40 years later. A daughter, Cheryl, who was a senior in high school, and maybe just out of high school, I can't remember. And I think she was just out of high school. And then Billy. Cheryl's still very active in our church, teaches and works after all these years. Married one of the guys she met in our church. And so they came over, and after a little while, they had some doubts. Bill and Sherry, the parents, had some doubts about their salvation. And so we had sat in their living room, went through all the scriptures together, and they got their salvation settled. And great thing, seeing the kids grow. Then they decided, Sherry told me, we raised 3 kids without God. We'd like to try it with God. And so they had 2 more kids, Chris and Brian. And Brian is a pastor here in California, and Chris has been in the mission field until COVID hit, and came home for a while to see what God would have him do. They were in the process of coming home anyway, and then with paperwork and all, they're in the area where his wife Rebecca's home church is, all those things, just because of borrowing chairs from the next door neighbor. And when I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, I talked about the lines are falling to me in pleasant places, that God has a pattern and God has a path, and there are things you can't second guess. You couldn't cause it. That situation, the house, the neighbors, the borrowing the chairs, that wasn't my ingenuity, that wasn't my planning, that was God. And to accept the understanding in our lives that God works in our lives, that Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good. You can't cause those things. There's so many things. Now, there's bad things that happen in our terms, bad. Joseph being sold by his brothers was bad in our terms, and God used it for good, and God meant it for good. And Daniel being taken away as a slave, and many of the stories of our heroes in the Bible all faced bad, but God was in the bad, and God had a plan. Job's trials, how many people have been comforted by Job? So we have to commit our lives to God, that He is faithful and He is good, and He knows what's going on, and to trust Him. And again, it's not easy, but so 6 weeks there. I mentioned meeting last time I talked about this, meeting Frank Pasquale, and he rented the house to us and his hall for $100 a week. And that was Sunday morning. Well, Sunday night, Wednesday night, we were meeting in our living room next door to him. Well, he started seeing so many people in our living room, he decided he'd rather let us use the rented hall for free than use our living room and where his furniture. I don't know. It was a furnished house. It had the couches and chairs and the beds and everything. It was all furnished because we didn't have a thing. We came to start the church. It was us and God, and a handful of books and a good God. And so that's when we started on our 6th Sunday or 7th Sunday. I guess we had 6 weeks in Wildomar School. 7th Sunday, we rented the hall there, Pasquale's clubhouse, they called it. And then we started using it a few weeks later for Sunday night, and then a few weeks later for Wednesday night. And we were there till our 5th anniversary. And on that property, we had some big days. We had our first anniversary, we had 127 people. Second anniversary, we had 271. But that 127 people was fun. We had a picnic and bicycle races for the kids, and we had a watermelon eating contest and a pie throwing and at people, and it was just fun. And God was doing something. There was a spark. There was a excitement, and new people coming and getting saved. I remember one lady had gotten saved, and she gotten saved in her home, and she came to church, and she was coming forward to get baptized. Her husband was not saved. He's in the military, and so he'd been gone when she'd been coming and gotten saved. And so, but they sat together in church while I gave the invitation. Maybe, I don't know, 50 to 80 people in the building. And she got out of her seat and went this way and came forward to get baptized. I expected her. He got out of his seat and went this way, not knowing the other was going up there, and he was coming forward to get saved. And they became two of our most faithful Sunday school teachers. And God just, things were just happening, even in those early days. And it was really exciting, a lot of fun and big days. And we got a trailer. We only had a little one stall men's room and the ladies' room, just like smaller than your house, because there's no shower, just a toilet and a sink. Little tiny men's room and ladies' room. That's all there was for bathrooms. We had a lot of people. And then we started running a van. Randy to Mobile. I led him to Christ early, just in the early days of our church. And Randy's still coming with his wife. And Randy was driving a van, like a carpool shuttle. And he said, we were picking people up in cars. And he said, I'd ask my boss if he'll let us use it on Sunday. I said, you get a letter. We're not going to do anything crooked here. Make sure the boss knows what we're doing. And the boss said, great, use the van. So we were using that carpool van and picking people up on Sundays. And then we got a bus. And our first bus was, we gutted it. And actually, I think it already was. I think we got it from another church. It was emptied and had long shag carpet in it. And it was ridiculous. And our guys built cribs down one side, double-decker cribs. And it's like cages with PVC pipe. And and near the baby, put the babies in the cage. That's where Caleb and Beth Beal, or Caleb and Carrie Beal were. Because their first Sunday, they were in car seats. They were just newborn. Brett was 2, and the kids were just born. And I remember seeing this research engineer for Rockwell bringing his 2 babies, and I'm thinking, oh, they're putting their kids on a bus. They're never coming again. But they did, and he's been our school principal for 30 years. And Caleb's a pastor, and just amazing what God's done. Again, God did some things, but that old bus is just amazing. And we drove it. So if we had an activity somewhere, we'd drive the church nursery there. And God took care of things. And so finally we got a trailer with porta potties on it, so we could have bathrooms outside and inside. And it was a mess, but God was good. And he's been so good. I want to mention a couple of quick verses to you in the book of Luke, if you want to look. A very familiar story in Luke chapter 16. And I won't spend a lot of time on this. I've already been talking some, but just a quick observation. Yesterday, as I was reading this, something struck me for the first time. It's the story of the prodigal son. And most of us would know the story. Dad that's very well off had 2 boys. And the younger boy was tired of working the ranch, and he said, I'd like my portion of my inheritance, and I'd like to be done with this. Well, number one, the inheritance is yours after the dad's dead. And that boy it was not his inheritance yet, it was his dad's. And I'll just say to you, who have living family, your parents' stuff is your parents' stuff, it's not yours. And don't fight over it, don't argue over it, it's not yours. And until both parents go and your parents decide on paper who to leave things to you, it's not your stuff. Nobody should be trying to get into position to get their parents' things. That's covetousness, and it's corrupt, and it's wrong. And parents, you should have. I'm involved with a family right now. Ask my advice. A big mess among adult kids that are in their 60s, and dad's still living and of sound mind, but they're fighting over. They're negotiating who can get in the right position. And I think, man, people are greedy and covetous and evil. splitting families and hateful to one another, all over $1. Well, this boy, the dad decided to give it to him. And he said, here, you can take half of it and go. And the boy left. I don't think the dad said go. I think the dad gave him his half, but the boy did leave. And so now, remember, everything that's on the ranch, the farm, whatever, it's all the big brothers, because the younger brother took his. But it's not the big brothers, it's the dad's. And the dad chose to give half his stuff to the younger brother, who was a worldly punk. And then the dad kept the other half as his self. But it was understood that it would go to the big brother. Later on, the dad said to the big brother, all that I have is thine. None of this is your little brother's. He spent his. And so the boy goes and spends it in wild living and foolishness. And you know the story. So I want to read a couple verses here. It says, get my spot here. I'm in Luke 15. In verse 13, after many days, the younger son gathered all and took his journey to a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and sent him into the fields to feed the swine. And so there he is in the fields, feeding pigs, eating pig food, trying to stay alive, and everything he had was gone. All the friends are gone. The friends that you get through money are not friends. They're not going to be with you. He said, I know what I'll do. I'll rise, in verse 18, go to my father and say, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before thee, and no more worthy to be called thy son. And he did that, and he rose. And in verse 20, he arose and came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion on him, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. So the son's coming. The son didn't even get home yet. And there the father sees him. And the dad goes out and meets the boy. And of course, a picture of our Heavenly Father who wants us, who cares about us. And you can wander off into sin. You come back with the attitude of the prodigal, I've sinned and I'm wrong. You're welcome back. And you can't go so far that you're not welcome back to God. And so he meets the prodigal. And most people that focus on that part of the story, we all know that. But what I never noticed before, I noticed it but never stuck out. It says when the big brother, he was working the field, the big brother came, and the servant says, thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received your brother, he received him safe and sound. And the big brother now, in verse 28, he was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And so the big brother, he'd been out working all day, and he comes home, finds this lazy, drinking, carousing brother of his that had squandered all his living, comes home, the dad's having a party, and it bothered the big brother. The big brother was mad. He probably didn't like the little brother, figured the little brother took his stuff and left. Go ahead, stay away. Don't come back here and mess our family up. Now, you may not understand that, but if you've had a sibling hurt your family, you do know. And there's some homes that have been pretty tore up by kids that have done wrong, and the parents lovingly trying to help the kid, and then the kid hurts the parents again, and the other siblings say, just throw that guy out on his ear. And it's a terrible thing to happen, but it's a reality. You don't want people you love to be hurt, and sometimes your siblings hurt. And we know people kids who've stolen from their parents to buy drugs, and just the family can be a mess, especially when you get drugs and liquor involved. But the thing that stood out to me is this. When the big brother was struggling, the father went out and met him too. There's two brothers who were struggling. One was struggling with sin of liquor and partying and wild living and poverty. And he was broken over his own sin, and he comes back, and the father went out to meet him. Remember that we're taking the picture of the Father as our Heavenly Father. But there's another brother who'd done right, who'd worked hard, who'd labored, he'd sacrificed, he'd honored his father. And he struggled a little bit in his heart. Pride, jealousy, anger, who knows what emotions are going on. But it says there in verse 28, he was angry. So we know he was angry. God said he was angry. He was mad about this little brother. And so he wouldn't even go to the house. He just stayed out, sitting on the corral fence watching the horses. I don't know if they had a corral or horses. But, the Father knows when you've done right and you're struggling. You've labored, you've tried to do the right thing. Some corrupt person has twisted and manipulated circumstances, and they're going to get theirs. In this story, obviously, when the party was over and everything's done, everything still belonged to the big brother, and the little brother, he had nothing. He was just a guest. And depending on how the big brother wanted to treat him, or the dad wanted to treat him, obviously, but when you're the one who's labored to do right, and I remember Dr. Hiles preaching the sermon, "Let's Hear It for the Big Brother," as a youth conference sermon, and all thousands of teenagers, and he just preached the whole sermon to the kids who've done right and said, "Thank God for you. Let's throw a party for the big brother." And but in this case, sometimes you can do right and still struggle with your spirit. You can do right, maybe look with jealousy, look with criticism, look with maybe bitterness, maybe anger, like the big brother here. But the tender heart of our God, he comes to you who are doing right, who are struggling. And our Heavenly Father knows you've done right, and he knows you've tried, and he knows life's been hard, and he knows the worldly crowd. He knows what they've done, and he does love and forgive them. But he comes out, the Father comes out to the big brother. He meets him outside, just like he did the little brother. He meets him on his territory, and he assures him of his love. But I'll tell you what else he assures him of: his inheritance. The little brother had no inheritance. He was saved, if we're talking about heaven and hell and father and children. The little brother was saved, and he was welcomed, but he had no inheritance. There's a lot of people going to get to heaven flat busted. They may have been rich on earth, or they may not have been, but you can get to heaven and be broke. Remember, Jesus said, "Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't corrupt and thieves don't break through and steal." And Paul wrote about the judgment seat of Christ on several occasions. And he says, if you're wood, hay, and stubble, and gold, silver, and precious stones, but if it'll be tried by fire, the wood, hay, and stubble burn up. He said, if any man's work is burned, what you've worked for, if it's all worldly, it's going to burn. He shall be saved, yet so is by fire. Yeah, you'll get saved and get into heaven, but all your work's gone. You don't have any rewards. And I'll just say this: you that have done right, and you've tried to do the right thing, and maybe some hardships, maybe some other people have hurt you, but you've stuck by the stuff, doing the right thing. I can assure you this: number one, the Father's more than willing to come out and meet you where you are, and he cares, and he does love you. And number two, your inheritance is secure, and God is going to take care of you, because he says there in verse 31, and he said to him, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine." Thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Three thoughts. One, the Father wants to come out and meet with you. Number two, God's going to be with you. The dad in this story says, "You're ever with me." We're close. We work together. We're on this place. And wouldn't you rather be near to the Father than off in the flesh, being a fool? And thank God that he welcomes the fool back when they're brokenhearted. And third, all that I have is thine. But there's an inheritance day coming. There is a day coming, and you can rejoice in it when God pays his debts, and not just his debts. God rewards his workers. And you read through the Bible, there's a lot of capitalism in here. There's a lot of God paying people for their work. And I can assure you today, you that have stood for right, done right, you that have not done right, I can assure you God welcomes you back. But you that have done right, the Father wants to meet you outside just as much as you want to meet the Son. He understands you're wrestling. He understands there's some struggle, maybe an attitude. You've done right and you struggle. But he wants you to understand, you and I were close. Me and this kid were not. This kid's gone off and ruined his life. But you're with me. You're always with me. And number two, everything I've got is yours. And what an inheritance, to inherit the Heavenly Father's inheritance. And the Bible talks about you and me being joint heirs with Christ. And so let's relax. do right, trust him, love him. Don't worry about what the rest of the world's doing, and trust that God's in charge. Hope you have a great Friday. I hope you'll pray for soul winning tomorrow. Pray for Sunday. Special days are always awkward preaching. Your church, our church. Pray for any pastors you know. Most Sundays I preach and I enjoy preaching, but special days are always hard because people come to church there's people that'll be in church Sunday that don't normally come, and it's I would like them to come back, and it's wanting just the right sermon, and it's a special day, and so people want a special sermon. Well, I don't do special. I'm just boring, normal, and but you that go to other churches, pray for your pastor especially that God would give him just the right sermon this week, and then Sunday night at our church we have Brother John Everettson and the Golden State Baptist College tour group, a ladies trio, going to be singing, and we'll have a good Sunday night. And as far as I know, I'll be preaching on what is the old time religion or something along those lines. I might let Brother Everettson preach. We'll see. But right now I'm planning on preaching. But I hope you can come on Sunday and be a part of things. Hope you can come Saturday, 9:45, and go out with us soul winning, and we'll have a good day. Thank you for your faithfulness, and have a great Mother's Day weekend.